Hey guys, my name is Atlas and welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. If not, welcome to the ASMR channel where I delight in the bizarreness of classic fairy tales. Before we get stuck in today, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the ASMR community that I've found on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. It is astounding to me how many warm, incredibly supportive, amazing people exist, all in this community, just picking each other up, championing each other's works, and I'm stoked to be able to count myself among you. And so thank you very much, one, for watching this video, and two, just being the absolute badass people that you guys are. Please keep being you. Okay. I also thought that today I would do a soft-spoken video rather than entirely whispered, just to try out something new. Anyway, today we are reading from that very same book that we've done the past few. And if you do like today's story, I do encourage you to please check out the others because they're all pretty fun. And another shout out before we get started to Ginger Lee, who today suggested that we read Sleeping Beauty, which is what we're going to do. And to that end, if anyone does have a recommendation or a suggestion as to what I should read in the future or in the next video, please do let me know. Because, I want to make what you guys want to hear. So, the Grimm Brothers call this one Little Briar Rose, but we all know it as Sleeping Beauty. So, without further ado, Little Briar Rose by the Brothers Grimm. A long time ago, there were a king and queen who said every day, if only we had a child. But they never had one. Again, this is a very prominent theme in all of the Grimm fairy tales that we've read to date. Everyone wants kids. But it happened that once when the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water onto the land and said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has gone by, you shall have a daughter." Thanks, frog. What the frog had said came true, and the queen had a little girl who was so pretty that the king could not contain himself for joy and ordered a great feast. He invited not only his kindred, friends, and acquaintance, but also the wise women, in order that they might be kind and well-disposed towards the child. There were 13 of them in his kingdom, but as he only had 12 golden plates for them to eat out of, one of them had to be left at home. Get more plates, you're a king. The feast was held with all manner of splendor, and when it came to an end, the wise women bestowed their magic gifts upon the baby. One gave virtue, another beauty, and a third riches, and so on with everything in the world that one can wish for. When 11 of them had made their promises, suddenly the 13th came in. She wished to avenge herself for not having been invited, and without greeting or even looking at anyone, she cried with a loud voice, or rather, today, in a soft voice. The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead. And, without saying a word more, she turned around and left the room. Mic drop. They were all shocked, but the 12th, whose good wish still remained unspoken, came forward, and, as she could not undo the evil sentence, but only soften it, she said, "It shall not be death, but a deep sleep of 100 years into which the princess shall fall." That's a bizarre loophole, really. I'm just going to completely undo what she did, but impose my own pretty messed up wish. Maybe she's the bad guy. The king, who would fain keep his dear child from the misfortune, gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burnt. I have no idea what a spindle is, so I'm just going to sort of pretend that it looks like this. Meanwhile, the gifts of the wise women were plenteously fulfilled on the young girl, for she was so beautiful, modest, good-natured, and wise, that everyone who saw her was bound to love her. It happened on the very day when she was 15 years old that the king and queen were not at home, and the maiden was left in the palace quite alone. So she went round into all sorts of places, looked into rooms and bedchambers just as she liked, and at last came to an old tower. She climbed up the narrow winding staircase and reached a little door. A rusty key was in the lock, and when she turned it, the door sprang open, and there, in a little room, sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. It's a little throwback for you to Rumpelstiltskin. Is it too early to be referencing my own content? Probably yes. Good day, old dame. Okay, another throwback. I wonder if it's the same old Dame Gothel from Rapunzel. That would be cool if they did like a Grimm cinematic universe. And these were the same people. Anyway, stop self-referencing, Atlas. "Good day, old dame," said the king's daughter. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman. Which I imagine is obvious. And nodded her head. Why? Why did she nod her head? "I'm spinning," said the old woman. "What sort of thing is that rattles around so merrily?" said the girl. And she took the spindle and wanted to spin too. But scarcely had she touched the spindle when the magic decree was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger on it. I mean, if I was her folks, I would just be saying, "Look, not Rapunzel, whatever her name is, princess, little Briar Rose, I presume. There's a thing called a spindle in the universe. When you see it, do not touch it, you will die. Or fall into a 100-year sleep. Just don't do it. In fact, here are some chainmail gloves that you should wear always. Literally do not touch anything remotely sharp." But there we go. I'm not her parents. And in the very moment when she felt the prick, she fell down upon the bed that stood there and lay in a deep sleep. And this sleep extended over the whole palace. The king and queen, who had just come home and had entered the great hall, began to go to sleep. Did they just get into their pajamas, make a chamomile tea, began to go to sleep, and the whole of the court with them. The horses, too, went to sleep, in the stable, and the dogs in the yard, the pigeons up on the roof. I imagine that's pretty dangerous if actually the pigeons are falling asleep. Wham, bam, bam. Poor pigeons. The flies on the wall. Even the fire that was flaming on the hearth became quiet and slept. Presumably that just means went out. The roast meat left off frizzling. Is frizzling a word? What does frizzling mean? I assume it means sizzling. I mean, who am I to question the Grimm Brothers? Of course it's a word. The roast meat left off frizzling. And the cook, who was just going to pull the hair off, the scullery boy, because he had forgotten something. What? Is that what happens when you forget something? You get scalped. Let him go and went to sleep. You've escaped this time, scullery boy. And the wind fell, and on the trees before the castle not a leaf moved again. But round about the castle there began to grow a hedge of thorns, which every year became higher and higher, and at last grew close up around the castle and all over it, so that there was nothing to be seen, not even the flag upon the roof. But the story of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose. Now we're introduced to her. Why can't these stories start with, oh, there was a princess. Her name was Briar Rose. That would be handy. Anyway, but the story of the sleeping Briar Rose, for so as the princess was named, went about the country, so that from time to time kings' sons came and tried to get through the thorny hedge into the castle. But they found it impossible, for the thorns held fast together, as if they had hands, and the youths were caught in them, could not get loose again, and died a miserable death. After long, long years, another king's son came to that country and heard an old man talking about the thorn hedge, and that a castle was said to stand behind it, which a wonderfully beautiful princess named Briar Rose had been asleep for 100 years, and that the king and queen and the whole court were asleep likewise. He had heard, too, from his grandfather that many king's sons had already come and had tried to get through the thorny hedge, but they had remained sticking fast in it, and had all died a pitiful death. That's a yuck image. Just a thorn, really, just with all these tiny boys' bodies stuck in it. Grim. Then the youth said, I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful Briar Rose. The good old man might dissuade him as he would, but he did not listen to his words. But by this time, the 100 years had just passed, and the day had come when Briar Rose was to awaken again. So it's sort of just luck for this new king's son. When the king's son came to the hedge, it was nothing but large and beautiful flowers, which parted from each other of their own accord and let him pass unhurt. Then they closed again behind him like a hedge. Exactly like a hedge. Hedges that close behind people. That sounds like a hedge. In the castle yard, he saw the horses and their spotted hounds lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons with their heads underneath their wings. It's a cute image, but I suspect if they've just fallen from the sky, it's to mask a cracked skull. And when he entered the house, the flies were asleep on the wall. The cook in the kitchen was still holding out his hand to seize the boy, and the maid was sitting by the black hen, which she was going to pluck. That's a new character. We didn't hear about the maid before. He went on farther, and in the great hall he saw the whole of the court lying asleep, and up by the throne lay the king and queen. He still went on farther, and all was so quiet that a breath could be heard. And at last he came to the tower, and opened the door into the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, so beautiful that he could not turn his eyes away, and he stooped down and gave her a kiss. This isn't really a very 2020 story, is it? Kids, don't kiss unconscious people, no matter how beautiful they look. It's a bad idea. I mean, I suspect it works out well in this case, but don't do it. But as soon as he kissed her, Briar Rose opened her eyes and awoke and looked at him quite sweetly. This is just luck. It's just at the end of 100 years. Literally, the spell is wearing off completely irrespective of true love's kiss. Useless. Then they went down together, and the king awoke, and the queen. Also, why is she looking at him sweetly? She must be so confused. The last thing she knew, she just fell asleep with this old woman. And now there's this dude kissing her. Yuck. The king awoke, and the queen, and the whole court, and all looked at each other in great astonishment. And the horses in the courtyard stood up and shook themselves. The hounds jumped up and wagged their tails. The pigeons upon the roof pulled out their heads from under their wings, looked around, and flew into the open country, I'm sure with severe brain damage. The flies on the wall crept again. I'm sure we would have been equally happy if they had remained asleep. The fire in the kitchen burned up, flickered, and cooked the meat. Don't touch that meat. The joint began to turn and frizzle again, because that's still a word. Then the cook gave the boy such a box on the ear that he screamed. It's such a happily ever after sort of tale. The cook just whacks the boy. And the maid plucked the fowl, ready for the spit. And then the marriage of the king's son with Briar Rose was celebrated with all splendour, and they lived contented to the end of their days. Apart from the boy who just got whacked around the head. And also, I can't imagine the end of their days is very far away, considering they've been asleep for 100 years. And the book is pretty unclear as to how, if at all, they've aged. But I assume they are now quite old and very ready to die. Also, why was there a frog at the beginning of the story? Is that really of any consequence? That there was a sort of prophet frog who just tells him that yes, they will have a kid? They could have just had a kid. Seems like two different stories. Anyway, that was fun as well. I mean, it was a little less sort of kick-ass than Little Red Cap was. Mainly because the protagonist, our lead lady, has literally no agency at all. And he spends most of the story asleep. What's the moral supposed to be? The whole thing's literally luck. Maybe the king should have brought an extra plate. Doesn't sound that hard to have 13 gold plates. Well, who am I to say? I'm not a king. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me read that. If you've survived the past 15 minutes or so, And yeah, as I said before, if you have a suggestion as to what I should read next, please let me know in the comments. I would love to chat to you guys. And yeah, otherwise, see you next time. Have a good one.